Today I'm going to be talking about specific learning disabilities. I chose to give a lesson on this because I figured that it was something that I'd see the most as an educator, and I would have to deal with kids who have these specific learning disabilities a lot in my classrooms. I've done some observation hours, and I've noticed that in every class there's been multiple children who have these learning disabilities, whether it's dyslexia or are just falling behind. And so I was really interested in learning a little bit more about that. Additionally, I have two brothers at home who have dyslexia, so I've always been super interested in what I can do as an educator to help them. They faced a lot of struggles growing up, and it was sometimes really hard to watch them just struggle so hard to do things that I didn't struggle with were pretty easy for me. So I'm interested to see what I can do as an educator to best help students like them. A specific learning disability is a disorder in one or more of the basic psychological processes involved in understanding or in using language, spoken or written, that may manifest itself in the imperfect ability to listen, think, speak, read, write, spell, or to do mathematical equations. And this is kind of a mouthful, but basically it just means students who have trouble learning and using certain skills, including but not limited to reading, writing, listening, speaking, reasoning, and math. The Center for Parent Information and Resources says that researchers think that learning disabilities are caused by differences in how a person's brain works and how it processes information. Children with learning disabilities are not dumb or lazy. In fact, they usually have average or above average intelligence. Their brains just process information differently. This is something that I think is super important to remember, especially as an educator, that the kids that are struggling maybe to learn the concepts, they're not dumb, they're not lazy necessarily. It's just so much harder for them because their brains just process things differently. Looking at my younger brothers many times, when I was 10 or 11, I thought they're just dumb. They just can't spell. They just can't read. But looking back, that's obviously not the right judgment that I made. I didn't realize how much harder it was for them to be able to process these things and to read because it just came naturally for me. But it doesn't come naturally for everyone. I mean, we have to remember that. It is reported that 1 in 5 students have a learning disability, which is a really high statistic. I did not think it would be that high. So it becomes even more important to us to be able to recognize and become familiar with the signs and symptoms and accommodations that we can provide. Specific learning disabilities are kind of a wide category. It's kind of an umbrella term that covers more specific things such as dyslexia, dysgraphia, dyscalculia, which are like reading, writing, and doing math, and then developmental aphasia, which is kind of just struggling to put things into words, whether that be through speech or writing, just struggling to make the right word connections. But it does not include visual, hearing, or motor disabilities. Intellectual disabilities, they might seem similar, but they're actually quite different, and then emotional disturbance. These all have their own category under IDEA and are treated differently. Because specific learning disabilities are such a wide topic and cover a lot of ground, the signs and symptoms really vary from student to student. So they're not the same, they can be completely different, and it makes it really hard to diagnose and to notice and to figure out the best way to help. But some symptoms include having trouble learning the alphabet if they just can't remember it, or if they are mixing up their B's and their D's. That's a really good tell of dyslexia. If they have trouble with spelling, or if they are just not able to understand what they are reading. If their comprehension skills are lacking, that's a really good tell. Additionally, if they have trouble with basic calculations, their math just isn't progressing at the rate you would want it, or if they confuse math symbols and misread numbers, again going back to dyslexia, or if they have trouble following directions, even that can be a sign of a specific learning disability, just because their brains aren't processing information in the way that they do in a child without it. I did some research while learning a little bit about students with specific learning disabilities, and I found that there are a lot of really sad statistics that are out there in the world that students with learning disabilities are 3 times more likely to be expelled or suspended during their time in school. They're also 2 to 3 times more likely to abuse drugs and or alcohol by the age 18. Obviously, there's a lot of reasons that these statistics come to be the case. But I think it's very likely that a lot of the times these students who have these disabilities aren't getting the proper accommodations and help and the love really that they deserve in a lot of situations. And that can be really hard for a student. It can be hard to make good decisions when you're not receiving the support that you need. So they might fall into some bad decisions and bad habits. Additionally, only 30% of students are identified by third grade. And I definitely think that's something that needs to be improved. We need to recognize that it's good to identify the students earlier. By the time students are in third grade, their peers are reading and writing, and they're doing multiplication and division, and it's so much harder to get caught up if they are already at a higher level, if that makes sense. So being able to give them the support to build them up to the level that is easily within their reach, that they can easily obtain, is super, super, super important. Also, it's reported that 78% of teachers lack the adequate training to support these students. And that's really sad. That's a really big problem. If we have so many students, 1 out of 5, who have these specific learning disabilities, we should make sure that almost every teacher has the training that they need to help these students. And I don't think that necessarily it's the teacher's fault or the faculty or anybody's fault. I think it's just the system that we have currently isn't really designed to help the students who are falling behind, which is really sad because everyone deserves a chance and everyone deserves to succeed. So we definitely need to be working to make sure that the students who have these disabilities are given the same chances to succeed. Some ways that we can set these students up for success is to be on the lookout for students who have these specific learning disabilities, recognize patterns and things that might set them apart. And as soon as we can, we need to get them an IEP. These plans will help them succeed. They'll give them the accommodations that they need. They will help them so that they have an equal advantage in the classroom. We need to be familiar with the accommodations available, and we need to be able to be offering them to the students. That includes assistive technology, which is super helpful. We need to be aware of the symptoms that the children struggle with, specifically on an individual level, which is really difficult when you have so many students. But we also need to be aware of the resources that we have available, recognizing, hey, this might help. We have this at our fingertips and we're not using it. Let's be able to implement it more. It's also super important to work with parents, teachers, have a community that is here supporting you, supporting the student, so that they can get the help that they need. Some accommodations that are really helpful for a lot of kids who have specific learning disabilities are we can give them step-by-step instructions. So not giving tasks that are too big, we need to break it down into smaller actions that are more easy to remember and easy to accomplish that lead to the bigger step in general. And this includes giving it in writing and verbally. This way they have different ways to make sure that they're doing the right thing, that they can remember, that they can stay on task. We can give them extended time for assignments, recognize that it's going to take them longer to do the reading than it is for other kids, so give them a little bit more grace there. Use different printed materials to assist. If a kid has dyslexia, it's probably going to be difficult for him to read the tiny print in the textbook, so being able to find bigger text or put it up on a computer screen that they can zoom in on is going to be super helpful for the kid. Also, we can grant them access to other forces like notes that we might take, notes that their peers might take. We can record lectures that they can look back on, and we can give them the opportunity to use spell check because this will also be super helpful for them. Overall, I think one of the most important things that we can do as friends, as teachers, as parents even possibly someday is recognize that these students are so much more than just the struggles that they're facing. They're people, they have emotions, and we should do whatever we can to show love and support for them. Some ways that we can do this, specifically for people who have these learning disabilities, is to give praise frequently. They're working hard, they deserve to be recognized for that. Also value their mental health and take constant check-ins. It's good to find community also among teachers and among maybe students who have similar struggles. We got to discover what works best for them so that things are easiest for them. Additionally, it's also really important to develop these good relationships between students, teachers, and parents. This way, it makes it so that their home life and their school life are flowing smoothly and there's great communication happening there. It makes a really big difference. Overall, I've just been grateful to be able to study and learn more about students who have these learning disabilities, I definitely have a lot to learn, and I'm excited to continue to learn more about how I can support them.